afternoon. This is Ray Mofield along with Shelby McCallum. We're continuing our tapes for the Library of Marshall County, the Oral History Library at Murray State University, and for the library at Frankfort, Kentucky, the State Archives. WCBL Radio is paying the expenses for this as a public service. This afternoon we're in the apartment of Homer Ford in the Jackson House in Paducah, Kentucky, noted Marshall Countyan whose name will be familiar to most of you, I'm sure.
91 years old.
91 years old?
91 years old.
Well, that is fine. I'll tell you, when you get that age, you can certainly be proud of it, and I know you are glad to have attained such. You've already told us your age. Were you born in Marshall County?
Born in Marshall County in 1891. Next me, I'm going on my 92nd year, and I can remember things that happened way back then better than things that happened last week.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm experiencing the same phenomenon to a lesser degree. Mr. Ford, who were your parents?
George and Celia Ford lived over at Scale. Went to Oak Valley Church.
Well, what do you know about that? Do you remember the grandparents on either side of the family?
Oh, yes. Aunt Katie Ford and Uncle Joe Ford. And then my grandparents on mother's side was Uncle Jeffy Heath. He lived at Benton and ran a little grocery store at Benton. Over at Benton. I don't remember my grandmother right because she was dead before I was born.
Do you remember your ancestry further back? Did your ancestors come, say, from Virginia or Carolinas or?
No, I don't. I didn't trace my ancestors back, but Reba Heath chased it back. My mother was a Heath, Uncle Jeff Heath's daughter, and Reba chased that back until she found out that our great-great-grandfather, I don't know how great it was, but McCracken County was named after him. The man by the name of McCracken, and he was killed by the Indians. And she traced that back, and I have that record now.
Well, Captain McCracken was in the War of 1812 and served under, of course, Isaac Shelby, who had been the hero of the Revolutionary War at the Battle of Kings Mountain. So that gives you quite a distinguished ancestry.
Well,
Henry Ford always claimed that his parents, great-great-great-grandparents, came from Ireland. So, but I guess you can have Fords in almost any language, can't you?
I find Fords everywhere, but not very many of them together.
All right, now you've told us about that. Where did you go to school?
I went to school at Oak Valley. Started there, one-room school, and I remember the first day I ever went. And I didn't want to carry my book. I had a little first reader, And old Uncle Marcus Pace was the teacher. And Nonna Pace was his daughter. She's known to somebody else now. But we went down there, and was that somebody ringing my doorbell? I went down there, and I didn't want to carry my book. And he put the letters all on the board, and I never did use the book very much, but I remember reading in that little book, the pictures in it. Jip, get up, Jip, the little goat hitched to a wagon.
Yes.
And I remember all that, Mold McGuff, his readers,
Yes, sir.
Remember every one of them. And I remember things that happened then, back in those days.
Do you remember any other teachers after that you could name?
Well, I mean, all of them. I reckon Tom Hartsfield was the next one. I believe Tom finally made a doctor and died before he practiced very long. Tom McGrigor, I guess you've heard of Tom McGrigor, haven't you?
Yes, sir, I have.
He was on the teacher, and Coy Reader. I guess you've heard of Coy, and Blint Cox, I guess you've heard of him.
Oh, I've heard that name a lot.
And two or three others I can't think of now. That were my teacher. Lucy Faust was one of them, and Mr. Levitt, Henry Levitt was one of them, you know, old Benton.
I certainly remember Henry Levitt, great and honored lawyer and judge and so on.
Henry was a good teacher.
Henry was the first person to be interviewed on this program.
He was.
Yeah. We did the first interview with Henry before he died.
Well, I knew he hadn't been dead very long.
Yeah, it's been a year or so ago.
But
Well, Mr. Ford, we've got you up through school, and you've finished the 8th grade and at Oak Valley. I understand that you taught school for some part of your life. Did you do as some have told us, take an exam at the county seat and get a certificate?
that was the only way that I started teaching. We had a first, second, third class certificate, you know. And you didn't have to have anything else. Just you could teach on a third class certificate if you could get a school, or second or third class, first class. In first class you had to make 85%, and the second class you had to make 75, and the third class you had to make 75 on average on that.
Yes, sir.
Well, I managed to make one of those. I don't know which on the beginning, and I taught at school when I was started. I was just barely 18 years old.
Very little older than some of your students, I guess.
Oh, yes, I've got students here in the Jackson house now that went to school to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
What was your favorite subject to teach or maybe to take in school in those days?
Well, I don't know. I liked history mighty well, and I liked math mighty well. I don't know. It's that one-room school. We didn't have very many subjects, you know. They didn't teach.
What
me.
was the first school that you taught?
Taught a little school up close to Birmingham, Point Necessity.
Point Necessity.
You ever hear of that?
No, I never did before.
And it was a school that was in between the river and a slough there of some kind, and very not many people went to it. And it's a school that they just put out, and I got $25 a month for it, and gave $6 a month for
room?
for board and room.
Room and board, $6 a month.
$6 a month.
I'd be glad to pay that now.
And before the school was out, they had the building caught a fire on top, and we didn't have any water there, and any big boys. It was all just little fellows, and we couldn't get to it. Just a little spark on top caught the building fire, and we just had to stand there and watch it burn down. We got the benches out,
Mm-hmm.
but
All right, could you tell us what all the subjects you had to teach? You had 8 grades, I guess, in one room, and
8th grade. Well, that little room, school didn't amount to anything much. There's only just a few students there, and I went from there to another school that paid me $50 a month. That was Wilson Ridge. And we had grammar and spelling and reading and writing and arithmetic.
mm-hmm.
And I taught all 6 subjects. And that wasn't a very big school either, but I finally got a school over at Pew, and then they paid by the number of students you had.
Oh, so
And
the
I
larger
went to
the school, the more money.
school, and so I had some days there. I had 70 students in one room.
Did you ever have many discipline problems? You
Yes,
have to
I
use
did.
the switch sometimes?
I absolutely used it till I got through all the high school. Till I got to high school, then I never did use it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But that is my main, that was my main object. I whipped one boy, I remember 3 times one day.
Yeah, he was hard-headed sort of fella.
That was Rayford Dees. I guess you heard of Rayford, haven't you?
I don't remember him.
No, Rayford Dees. But now you think about one teacher teaching all the grades and teaching 70 students in one room.
With 6 different subjects to the
teach.
older ones anyway.
And you only had time to call the class around and discuss it a little bit and dismiss them and call another one around and dismiss it. And it is that all day long, that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a problem to keep order. And
Yes, sir.
that many
No, that's
is a problem.
The ones who had to sit there for several hours with very little to occupy them were tended to get pretty restless.
Yes.
Well, you've told us some of the more interesting things, some of the things that I've never heard before. Now, you were married, were you, Mr. Ford?
I married while I was teaching at Pew. That was my last, well, I taught another one-room school. No, let's see. That was my last one-room school. I taught it, after I taught at Wilson Ridge, I went over to Lone Valley and taught there, and that's where I met my girlfriend. And then after went over to Pew to fill out a school term over there, Miss Powell was teaching there, and she got married, and she called me and wanted me to finish her school out. She knew I had it for the next year. Well, I went over and took her school, and I married before that failed.
You had a quick courtship, huh?
Well, no, I'd been going with a girlfriend for a year or two, but, I went over to another school to finish her school out and married. The woman married, and I finished her school out, and then I married.
Well, we've run across this several times in our interviews. That in those days, courtships lasted longer, and so did marriages.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes. Yes, I agree with it very much.
Right, now, what was the young lady's name you married?
Larry Kennedy, Frank Kennedy's daughter. She lived down there at Big Cypress. And the way I met her, my sister was teaching school, Big Cypress School. And I met her before I ever was teaching, and I'd known her quite a little while.
Uh-huh. You have children, do you?
Yes, sir. I have one at Bowling Green. I have one at Benton. You know the one at Benton, I guess. Dr. Ford.
Yes, I know Dr. H.W. Ford, and I just wanted you to put it on the record, so to speak. So he was a bright young man. He went to medical school. I believe it was at Washington University in St. Louis.
No, he he graduated from Murray first,
Yes, sir.
and then he went to the school at Louisville,
University of Louisville.
University of Louisville, and
Mhm.
then he took his medical, what do you call it?
Internship.
Internship. He stayed there at St. Louis
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
for 2 years. He stayed there for 2 years.
That's what I was thinking
Yeah.
about his internship there. And of course, they have some fine young sons and your grandsons. I know you're proud of them.
I'm proud of them. They seem to be doing well. Each Debbie seems to be handling them fine because he's giving them something to do, you see, and they're getting little notice.
They're also involved in sports.
Well, that's why they're doing so well, you see, because they don't have to get out and tear up something, to get their name before the public, That's why they're doing so well,
Now, you talked about your one-room school experiences and so on. You then began teaching high school. What, Calvert City, was it?
Well, after I married, my wife and I'd start to go to Bowling Green. We didn't have any high school education, but we started going to Bowling Green, the normal school, you see. And we went to the normal school and come back and teach in a one-room school somewhere. Or I'd teach at Palmer somewhere. And finally, I graduated from Bowling Green.
Yes, so that was quite common in those days, though, and because there were no high schools in Kentucky, or by and large, till
Well,
1909.
there was a high school at Benton, but I went over there in the graded school to Henry Lovett in the grades to get a certificate because high school didn't help me get that grade certificate at all, and there wasn't any need of my going to high school, I thought, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I could go to Henry Lovett there and get a little better grades, you know, and take an examination and get a first-class certificate. But then I got all my high school work at Bowling Green. I didn't know when I got through. I didn't know the high school work from the normal work, you know. And so my wife and I went over there, and that's when you got an appointment to go over there, and they went up to the desk and enrolled. The charge was $5 for a Lyceum course, they called it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all the cost, and
$5 for a semester.
semester.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was
Ray, Mr. Ford has made some notes of some things he'd like to discuss. I thought we might ought to peruse those a little bit. You got politics down there. Were you involved in politics?
some I could. I just made those on. I can talk for half an hour on any of those subjects on there that you got.
Yeah. Well, let's see. You started after you got your degree from Bowling Green. You started teaching high school.
I started teaching in high school. I taught at Smithland, 1918, Livingston County High School, and
Someone told me that you coached the first basketball team in Marshall County, maybe, or at least Calvert City.
No, I put up the first basketball court in Marshall County. See, I'd been over at Bowling Green, and I kind of got an idea of it,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know the rules, and got back to Palma, and I had something to do for the boys, and I bought a rule book and found out and bought a basketball Sears and Roebuck, one of those outdoor ones, that big roll lines on the outside of it, you know, seams on the outside of it. And we marked it off with a hole and got us some plank, made us a back guard, and I went to the man that made the shop man, and he made me some goals, you know, and he told me how high to make them. And so we started basketball, and I could tell you a long time about that, you know. Every time it went out, bound to have to come back to the center again, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I could talk to you a long time.
The game has changed a little.
Oh, the game has changed, and I think it's better. So,
All right, so that gave you a focus for your physical education activities and so forth.
well, I left there and went over to Smithland then to teach, and the same thing happened over there. I started basketball county over in Livingston County. They didn't have any basketball over there, and we didn't have anybody to play with. You know, we had nobody else had basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And the time I got back to Calvert City then, that's when I started that school there, that high school. Why, Sharp and 2 or 3 other places.
Hardin started in 1912.
Hardin. Well,
Benton in 1909.
I was back at Benton now had a girls' high school basketball before in the other. I remember that, but I didn't. They had a big wall up between the boys' playground and the girls, and I couldn't see them play, but I could hear them play. And I was the only basketball court in the county. The girls had one now. Before I did.
All right, I understand that you also were involved in speech contests, debates, and so forth. Is that right?
I'd helped debate all over Marshall County the woman's suffrage law. And
Were you for it or against it?
well, it's just on. What side I was on. I'll tell you a harder debate than that, though, the stock law.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
you fellas don't remember anything about that when the stock ran everywhere, do you?
No, I don't.
I've heard about it.
I've
The
heard it.
hogs ran out and they fattened on the acorns, and the cows had run out and pasture everywhere, and so we could just fence off our own cornfields and things and let the others take care of themselves. Well, that was a hot subject because a lot of people didn't want to have to fence a farm. And that was a hot subject. Stock law, and they finally voted it, you know. But it was debated. It was a good thing to debate, and we'd have some pretty hot debates over it.
Were there any religious debates back in those days?
Yes, sir. Now, there's been a change in, quite a change in religion. The preachers fought each other harder than they do now. Preacher then, I've heard of many went up and called me a Camelot, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't heard but one in a year has called me a Camelot up preaching, you know, of some other denomination. And
Well, now,
then
Mr. Ford, do you consider that a derogatory remark?
I do.
Well, I just want to know.
I do, because it isn't right, and it's not right at all. A man made that down here in this not very long ago. He mentioned a lot of other churches, and I just spoke out in church. What about the Church of Christ? Oh, he said, I forgot about the Camelots. After it's over with, I went over to him and said, I said, do you still sell niggers and call niggers niggers and things like that? And I laid it down to him. I said, that's the first time that I've been called that in a long time. Well, they had those debates, but they don't do that so bad now. You don't hear that now, you know.
Mhm.
But we had a lot of debates. Kramer and had a debate down in Griggstown, and I attended that, and I attended a debate at Benton one time. And but Jewel Norman debated a lot. Jewel's here, you know. Jewel lives.
Yes, I understand he's in the Jackson house.
He's a real debater, but that's just about quit. But I'll tell you another thing about churches. The automobile had some bearing upon churches, and you wouldn't think it.
How do you say that?
Well, now listen. When we had no automobiles, and I lived at Oak Valley, when big meetings on there, I'd go to Oak Valley, and people around would come there because they didn't have a car. Zion's Call people would come there because they didn't have a car to drive there for. Maybe had a horse and buggy, but they just liked to come.
It's kind of recreation in a way.
Different ones would come there, you know, from different churches around. And we liked it. But then when the car came, instead of going to Zion's Call, where the Baptists were, well, I'd get in the car and I'd go over to Brownsburg or somewhere else where the Church of Christ was, don't you see?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of scattered us out a little bit, you see. The car scattered us out, and we quit going. It wasn't a neighborhood fair like it was.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought of it in that particular light. We'd like to ask you if you remember any county officials as you were growing up or any ways along.
Knew all of them nearly.
Mm-hmm.
Old Bill, you remember Walter Prince was the first Republican, or the only Republican that's ever elected in Marshall County. Do you know that?
Judge, yes.
I heard that he was the only Republican judge. How did that come about?
Well, the car reader ran against somebody. I've forgotten who it was. Carla, you don't remember.
No.
And he beat Coy in the Democratic primary, you know. So he beat Coy, and they just like to kill Coy. And this fellow that beat Coy, he got out and threw a big drunk and just cut up terrible. Well, Coy just came out and told the people, said he came out against him for the Republican, Prince.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Prince is a much better man than you Democrats go and vote for Prince because he's a better man. doctored in the leg prints.
That's sort of unusual. I would have thought then that they were maybe more prejudiced than they are, but maybe they were broader minded then than they are today.
Well, I don't know why that happened. Bill English now used to be a man, you know, that, well, I can't think as fast as I used to. I knew all of Bill English, and
What about some of the sheriffs in your...
I knew all of them, Pete Ely, and you can just name some of them, I'd know them, but...
Was there a man named Egner?
Oh, yes, I remember
Pete
Egner,
Egner.
Will Egner. Will Egner.
Well,
Yeah. And, Harry Miller, and I just knew all of them, but I just can't think of them all
Yes,
at once,
sir.
you know.
Ray, I'd like to ask him, just looking at some of Mr. Ford's notes here, he mentions telephones. I remember when I put the Calvert Theater in, and I remember the telephone system you had in Calvert City then. I remember one night I decided, my wife and I, to take a trip to Nashville, and we made one call, and 3 people called us back and said they wanted to go with us. They were all listening in on the telephone.
Well, that was a kind of a community telephone, was it?
Yeah.
Well, I put the telephone down there because I knew the first telephone that ever went through there. And it was from Calvert City to Scale, and it went through the woods, just one line went through the woods and everywhere.
Yeah.
It didn't last long, you know. Well, I got to say a word or two over it. I was at Scale one day, that little town over there, you know.
Sure.
And
Dr. Goff's hometown.
yeah, and they were talking over it, somebody was talking over it, and everybody was talking over it, and the fellow there said, listen to that a minute. And he put up my ear, and I thought it was awful. I could hear somebody way off somewhere talking.
Well, I thought that was humorous. I remember that telephone system, yeah. It also says that your father was the first person to gravel Benton. Does that mean the first streets in Benton?
He helped gravel the streets in Benton. And the gravel pits over there on that hill, you know, this side of Benton. He knew Pete and all those fellows, you know, his old partners, you know, and he helped gravel the streets there at Benton. And I knew Barnes, T.B. Barnes, you know, he's got a steel name up on one of those buildings over there, T.B. Barnes.
Uh-huh.
Who were some of the physicians around Benton in those days?
Dr. Stillian, Dr. Hall, and Dr. Thomas, and I don't know. Let me see. Stillian, Hall, and
Well, that's fine. I noticed you've had something in your notes here about log rollings. Could you tell us what they were?
I could talk to you half an hour about those log rollings and things of that sort. And
Did the neighbors come in and build a house for you, or a barn or something?
they'd come in and help. I can tell you about a log rolling first. Now, my father cleared the land in Clark's River bottom on Chestnut, where Chestnut Creek empties into Clark's River. And they just cut the undergrowth out, don't you see, and the big trees had deadened them. He deadened trees there that would almost build a one-room schoolhouse. Big old trees, you know, and right away up, he just deadened them. Cut around them, you know what I mean by deadening
Cut the
them.
roots.
Cut a sap around them, you know. And when they'd die and fall down, by then we'd cut them up and we'd call a log rolling. And men would come in and had a hand sticks, and they'd get under those, just as many on the side. Now I've seen them carry logs as half as big around as that table there, and pile them up, you know, in piles and burn them. And the women folks would have a dinner down there for them, you know, and they'd all eat dinner down there. And about the same way the barn raising, you know, they'd have those barn raising.
Doing lots of working together in those days, like thrashing wheat.
That's all. They all work together. Wheat thrashing.
Did you ever cut any ice and put it up in an ice house?
Now, you mentioned something there that I've seen. The old covered bridge down there, you know that.
Yes,
I
sir.
passed along down there one time, and I saw a great number of people out there on the river on ice, and they were cutting ice sand off that river to take and put up, you know, in sawdust. I never did see an ice house, but then.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, that covered bridge had a way of driving down and water the horses all down there, and I guess that's all gone now. And I can see that old covered bridge just as plain as I can see one of those things up there.
I remember it well myself. Well, I was fairly small, I guess, when they
They
took
said
it out.
that bridge was all cut and before it ever started putting it up, every piece was cut.
How many governors, you mentioned politics here on your notes, how far back do you go in remembering who was governor and anything relating to
Well,
that?
I'll tell you one thing about governors that'll tickle you.
All right, I'd like to hear it.
I voted for governors nearly every time that has run the governor, and I never have voted for one but one.
Well, do you
One.
Well, do you remember when Goebel was shot?
Oh, yes, I remember, and I've seen the spot. I've been up there and saw the spot where he shot. I thought Henry Ward, I said, now, Henry Ward is a good man. He's given us some good roads, and he's been a good park man, and I'm going to vote for him and let the Republican go.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and voted for Henry, and darn Henry didn't get beat.
Yeah.
And some others got beat.
Henry lives in Howey in the Hills in Florida now, a little town.
He does.
A little cottage there. I've been by to see him.
You have?
Yes, and he now spends most of his time taking care of flowers and things like that, gardening.
Well,
Did you know Mr. Solon Palmer?
I knew Solon Palmer well and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew right where the bank was, and I'd been in there and done business with him. And when the Depression was on, well, my father had a very smart little account in there. I don't know for that time, you know, maybe $1,000 or $2. And somebody said they saw him draw a lot of money out, you know, afraid the bank was going to burst.
Mm-hmm.
And that got all around the county there. His father had drawn his money out of the bank, afraid he's going to burst. And he's afraid he's going to get robbed, you know. Well, he went up there and he had the bank to make a statement that he didn't do it, and the other bank there, Benton, was all right in there, and he made a statement too that he hadn't drawn the money out of that. Father said he had a little package in there, and they laid up on that and did some business there, but he didn't. It wasn't money in that package.
At that time, many banks were in trouble over rumors.
Oh yes, and he was afraid somebody that would think that he had withdrawn his money and burst him up, you know.
Shelby, it's getting close to the end of the tape. Do you want to close out with your standard format here?
Well, I'm sorry that we can't cover more subjects, but we've been talking with Mr. Ford from high above the city of Paducah in this beautiful Jackson House suite here in Paducah. And we appreciate the invitation, the opportunity to visit with you, and we hope we come back later for another subsequent program. I want to ask you one question we've asked everybody. If you had your life to live over again, would you still choose to spend most of it in Marshall County?
Well, I don't know a better place.
Well, that makes it 100%. You're about the 15th person, and they've all said that they had no regrets.
Well, I spent part of my time in other places, Warren County and Lyon County and Livingston County, but as little time. But my home has always been in Marshall County, good old Marshall.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ford, and I'll let Ray Mofield give us our usual sign-off.
Thank you. We've been in the Jackson House visiting with Mr. Homer Ford, and this is Ray Mofield and Shelby McCallum. The program is produced by WCBL as a public service for the Marshall County Library, with copies going to the State Archives in Frankfort and the Murray State University Pogue Oral History Library. And that's our broadcast for today.